Impact Teams Radio. Welcome to Impact Teams Radio, the show where we explore what it takes to be a leader of the leaders in corporate America. Get ready to be inspired and discover proven tips for going from average to exceptional. Now, here's your host and guide, Tony Sherman.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Impact Teams Radio. I'm your host and guide, Tony Sherman. This is a show for leaders who lead leaders. And today my guest is Steve Lishansky. Thanks very much, Steve, for joining us.
Tony, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Steve and I met at the National Speakers Association, and Steve gave some training to us at the New England National Speakers Association, and it was so incredibly insightful and so incredibly. He has this great phrase when he's teaching. Does that make sense? Common sense? And it was just, and I heard it so often during that day's training, and I thought, yeah, it may be common sense, but most people don't do this. So, Steve, I'm very excited to have you as a guest.
Tony, it's a pleasure. Let me give the context for this point of common sense. Everybody knows the old 80-20 rule, that 80% of your results come from 20% of your clients and efforts. I have a different 80-20 rule for leaders, and it goes like this. 80% of success is common sense. Less than 20% of the people are using it. So when I say is it common sense, it means we're in the right territory to really make a difference. And most of the greatness in leadership and everything that I've ever seen in terms of high-performing teams and leaders really is pretty commonsensical. It's not esoteric.
Yeah, absolutely. But the funny thing is, it's like we forget in the day-to-day grind to step back, and unless it's part of our natural reflexes, we forget to do some of the obvious stuff. It's
so true, and it's initially the issue for many, many people. Let's do what makes the most sense is always where I like to start.
Right. So, Steve, let me step away from the mic for a minute or two and ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, the arc of my career, the last 22 years, has been spent doing two things primarily: helping leaders lead high-performing teams and bringing those teams together to really produce what teams should really be doing, which is multiplying the efforts of talented individuals, not just adding them, but multiplying them. The other part of it is really building what I call indispensable partner relationships. How do you build the kinds of relationships where people absolutely recognize your capacity to be an indispensable partner in their success? So that's what I did for the last 22 years. Before that, I used to run companies. And funny enough, I was in the toy business. I used to create and market toys to everybody from Walmart down to the corner Hallmark store. Most of my products were low-cost impulse toys, 80-cent wholesale, which is amusing because most of my clients today are some of the leading organizations in financial services, technology, pharmaceuticals, and healthcare. But what I always say, it's not what you did, it's what you learned. And what I learned running a small toy company was two things. One is we had to reinvent ourselves all the time, about every 6 months, because that could be the lifespan of a new product. And that was not a function of me as a CEO. That was a function of getting my team engaged to do that. My friends thought I was crazy because we were doing this in the 80s. As it turns out, I was just 20 years ahead of my time, because that is the critical issue for companies today and for leaders today. How do you lead change on a consistent, constructive basis? The other thing that happened when we were in the toy business is people used to copy us when we came out with good things. So we created as our competitive advantage the way we treated our clients and the way we took care of them was so superior to anybody else that they would choose to work with us when 6 other people could sell them something similar. And that's what I've been doing the last 22 years, teaching leaders how to lead change and build high-performing teams, and teaching them how to build client relationships where they're indispensable partners to their clients.
That's brilliant. And in fact, the funny thing is, as you were explaining that second part about, people knocking you off and being able to undercut you in price, the amusing thing about that, though, is if somebody has the intellectual laziness that copying you is the best they can do, you almost know you're going to win because they won't have the integrity to build those relationships.
You know, that's true. It wasn't about relationship. Oh, this is a good product, let's sell it. And we really believe that if we take care of our clients, let me just give you an example of what we started to do. Everybody's out there pushing their product, talking about, hey, this is lower price, this is, we have a different package, better package. What we said is, listen, we're selling to retailers. What's the retailer's biggest concern? Maximizing their dollars per square foot. They had a certain amount of space. They had to get the most dollars out of it. So while $200 a square foot was considered good in retail, we said, let us show you how to make $1,200 or more a square foot. And they go, I don't care what you're selling. You can help me do that. I want to buy from you. And that's the nature of the game today. How do you help your client get what they need most, even if that's not their primary focus or attention? And too many times people are too busy and too hectic to actually think through and ask the question, what's the most important outcomes I should be committing myself and my organization to?
Right. And in fact, what you've said then is there is the services you provide and there's the outcome of your customer, and they may be quite different things.
Well, exactly. And what's more important than the outcome of your customer? You want to be an indispensable partner in their success. We consider that the highest form of relationship possible in a professional sense. I am indispensable partner to you in the success of your business or organization. I earn that by the kind of trust and value that I deliver to you, the trust you can have in me to deliver the value that you're really looking for. Not even what you ask me for, but what you need most. And one of the most compelling ways in which you demonstrate that is you actually make sure that what you do is giving them what they need most, not just what they're asking for. Give me a good example here. People call me and say, I need leadership development. I need high-level sales and customer relationship training. And, of course, I could say, well, you came to the right place. What I say is, what exactly are you trying to accomplish? Because whether it's leadership training or client management skills, those are means to an end. What's that end result that would have maximum value? That's where we really need to help our clients go, because sometimes, I need training. I think that'll solve my problem. Well, if that's not your real problem, it probably won't solve it. So your job as an indispensable partner is to help them get clear about what's the most valuable, highest impact, greatest result that would make the biggest difference for them. And then let's see if I can help them achieve that. Now, it may be by way of leadership development, or it may be by way of client relationship skills. But let's get clear about what the real result is, and then let's figure out the right process. Not the process first. The process is what serves the outcome.
Yes, and in fact, you can see this from a professional services perspective or from an entrepreneurial perspective. Our natural instinct is to try and make you buy my services. So I'm thinking in terms of my process, not your outcome. So that makes a lot of sense.
But it's also, Tony, the one thing to really think about here, though, from a leadership point of view, it's critical, too. Leaders start looking at their quarterly results, their monthly results. They start looking at their head count. These are all parts of the puzzle that every leader needs to manage. But the real question is, what's the ultimate mission and vision of the organization? And are we establishing the metrics and benchmarks and measurements that are going to help us really fulfill on the mission and vision? That's what the leaders should be absolutely totally focused on, because if they're not, we're going to get caught up in operational details, and next thing you know, you've done a ton of work and produced nothing of real value. So even from a leadership point of view, the question is always, what's most important for me, for my team, for our organization? Because if we can't answer that well, you're not going to have a high-performing organization.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let me step back a bit, because we started a deep dive, which I expected with you, Steve. But let me ask you to share with our leaders, so they get more of a sense of you, 1 or 2 wins in your career that you're really proud of, why you're proud of them, and what that taught you personally about leadership.
It's interesting. One of my first and favorite all-time clients called me in, quite by accident. They were an IT group within a large financial services company. This was very early in my career, and what happened was, in the old days, an IT group used to own a certain portion of the budget of every one of their departmental partners. So I used to go in and say, Tony, let me see. I see you've got $3.2 million in your budget. Let me tell you how I'm going to spend it. With the inference being, because I'm the expert and you don't know anything about IT. Well, in one of the classic re-engineerings that goes on regularly in organizations, they got spun into a business unit. Now you did not have to spend money on IT, nor did you have to spend it with me. You could actually get an outside vendor, even though we both work for the same corporation, large Fortune 500. So I had 1 year to transform my culture from treating my clients as idiots who didn't know anything about IT to really being partners. They spent 6 months looking for somebody to market IT services. I happened to show up quite by accident about 7 days before they're supposed to make a decision. I spent an hour and 5 minutes with the key guy, the number 2 guy in the organization who was securing the right people to bring to the CIO. And somehow he decided he wanted to talk to me. In fact, at the end of an hour and 5 minutes, he stood up and said, if my people could do with their clients what you just did with me, we'd have no trouble. Meanwhile, it turns out they selected me to be the vendor, even though they had spent 6 days with the number 2 choice. And he said in an hour and 5 minutes, you knew more about our organization than he did after 6 days. And what happened was they were in the middle of a perfect storm. 48% of their clients were complaining their prices were too high at a time when they couldn't sustain themselves on the internal transfer price. Fast forward, over the next 12 months, we were able to raise their prices by 50%, and we reduced complaints about pricing to 12% of their clients. A major win. But more importantly, the second year of our work together, the IT group won the award for the most outstanding customer satisfaction in the enterprise. And that was 2 years into a 7-year relationship with some of the most remarkable people I've had the pleasure and honor to work with. That was one of my greatest wins, and we've replicated that in a lot of ways. But to start there with a major corporation, given my background was really more entrepreneurial. And today, 90% of my clients are major corporations, Fortune 500.
In terms of that win, what did that teach you about leadership?
What it really taught me was it's so critical to create value, whether you're talking about selling, managing relationships, or leading people, because we had to create culture change in there. And the culture change came because the leaders were willing to create a value proposition for their people, not just for their clients. And the value proposition was, we can be great, we can be outstanding, we can be successful, we can do more than survive, we can thrive. And part of that is what we need to do is to build certain other skills to go along with our outstanding technical skills. And this point of leading change and leading culture change through creating a value proposition is pretty much like dealing with clients, where the value proposition is what transforms your relationship with them. So whether you're dealing with a client or you're dealing with your team and your staff, if you can show them value that's substantially greater than what they have now, it's pretty easy to get them to go along with it. People talk about change being difficult. I absolutely disagree. It's only difficult if the value of what you're asking them to do does not show substantially greater outcomes than what they currently have. If it doesn't show substantially greater outcomes, why would they change? If it does, why wouldn't they change?
That's brilliant. So what you're saying is, as leaders, and I'm trying to bring this down to somebody in corporate America who may be leading a small team, who may be leading a couple of small teams, that one of the things we need to look at is not just what is the job in front of us, but what is the value of that job to whoever that stakeholder is, and what's the value to our team to change whatever they're doing to do something different.
Exactly. Well said, Tony. Because again, the value has to be clear to everybody who's involved. This is not just about a customer, because literally as a leader, your team is your customer. Your organization is your customer. To me, a customer or client is anyone who affects the outcome of your business. And that includes your assistant, your boss, your colleagues, your clients, internal and external. I mean, everybody has an impact on your business. When you start treating them as clients, when you start thinking about how do I add value to this person in this relationship, you will transform every meaningful relationship that you have to engage in. And if you're not making a high value, high impact with every one of the key relationships you're in, what are you doing with them? I mean, that's what I ask every leader. If you're not demonstrating value to your team, they don't just follow your whims. They need to see, I see where we're going. I see the mission. I see the value of the mission. I see the goals clearly. I'm committed. You've got my support. That's what great leaders do. That's what great salespeople do. They get commitment from the people they're dealing with to pursue together a meaningful outcome that has value to both parties.
And actually, as I was thinking, okay, but how do I do that? How do I do that? It tells me one or two things. If I can't do that with you, Steve, as my customer, I either am not, I don't know you well enough. I may need to stop and investigate more and ask you deeper questions, or what I'm doing is run of the mill and I need to hold myself to a higher standard. That's how I saw those two things that you reflected back to us then.
Well, I think that's a good way to do it. What I would say is that the only way to add value to anyone, whether it's your team members, executive team members, organizational members, or your clients, value lives in the mind of the other person. And if you don't understand the other person, what their challenges, what their opportunities are, if you don't know what they care about or what they're focused on or what they're responsible for, it's incredibly difficult to deliver value. So for me to be presumptuous, I know that, let's say, you're somebody who should be buying my services, and I can tell you 10 reasons why I'm better than the competition, is not very compelling and nowhere near as compelling as helping you get clear about what's most important, and then helping you see that not only do I have the credibility and the capability to be able to be helpful to you, I've already demonstrated it. One of the things we talk about all the time is, how do you choose your professional service providers? Now, let's use the example of your personal professional services provider, your doctor, your accountant, your lawyer, your dentist. Do you go by how many people referred you? Do you listen to them talk about what their price differential is? Do you look at how many degrees they have? No, what you do is you choose them on the basis of, who do you trust more to take care of you in an area you don't even know a lot about? And that's not a function of how much they charge, how smart they are, or what they say. That's a matter of how much they get your trust and your respect, how well they communicate with you. You know what? That's how human beings make choices. Do I trust you? Do I respect you? Do I have the kind of communication with you that makes me believe you will take better care of me than any other professional service provider? And if I do, that's how I'm going to win the business. Oh, by the way, here's an interesting piece. A lot of times, when do you negotiate your fees? If you're talking about dealing with external clients, after they've seen how wonderful you are? No, before you've ever delivered your services. So how do they know how much to pay you? Well, I'll tell you what, I think it's directly proportional to how much they trust you, how much they respect you, and how much they believe you have the kind of communication that will allow them to have what it is that they need most, even if they don't know what that is. It's that trust factor, that respect factor, that communication, that knowledge or belief that you will take good care of me that makes you the indispensable partner and irrefutably the one I'm going to choose to work with.
Wow. I mean, that's it, isn't it? But it takes a lot of courage if you're in a professional services relationship to leave money aside and to build the value, not knowing whether or not they will choose you. You have to be fairly secure in your own services and your own. No, it's not about service at that level. You have to be very secure in your own value add ability if you're going to put that to one side, because part of the sales is the can they afford me?
Well, here's the thing, though. You're going to learn a lot of things about your client. So you're absolutely right that price, I always say price is never an issue unless the value is not clear. So why are you giving somebody a price before you've established the value and the context within which this price would be outstanding? Just from a point of view of sales, I always say that a quarter or more of my clients hire me, never ask what it costs, because the value that they can get and the trust that they have in the way I'll take care of them is so high that, and they know that because of trust, I'm not going to go out and give them something crazy. But they're not asking me what it costs. The value's so great that whatever reasonable amount I could come up with would be fine with them. And then the other side of it is the only reason people argue about price is they don't have a reference in terms of the value of what you're taking care of for them. The only reason a leader would not get his team to sign on to culture change is because the value of the change that he's asking for, or she's asking for, is not clear enough or substantive enough. So if you have the confidence and the wherewithal to have the conversation, to bring out with clarity and with impact the value that the client or your team member can get, it's almost a no-brainer to be able to get reasonably compensated for that. But more importantly, as a service provider, you're finding out how easy it is to work with this client, whether indeed what they're looking for is what you have and can deliver, and whether this is the kind of person that you have the kind of chemistry to want to work with. So before you ever put a price on the table, you've got a good sense of what's important to them, what it's worth to them, whether they're going to be easy or difficult to work with, and whether they're the kind of ideal person you want to be with, whether you're hiring them for your team or they're looking to hire you for your services. You want to know those things every time.
Brilliant. So, Steve, I can't believe it. I looked up and we're out of time already. So I'd like to invite you back to do another episode where we can explore this in a bit on what I call a deep dive. Would you be open to that?
I'd be delighted to do that with you, Tony.
Thanks very much, Steve. So, Impact Nation, we've had a masterclass in adding value and thinking about value. So I would encourage everybody listening to this to take one or two of those ideas that Steve has got and to use it to shape your thinking in the next week, 2 weeks. And as I will say, if you take one or two nuggets from each episode, apply it to your life for 6 months, you'll be a far stronger leader in 6 months' time than you are today. So until next week, this is your host and guide, Tony Sherman, wishing you a great week. Bye for now.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Now go and apply these few gems. Make the wisdom you have heard your own. If you want to be part of our launch success, then please go to impactteamsradio.com/love and tell the world. If you want more and never want to miss a beat, please go to impactteamsradio.com/subscribe. If you have 3 minutes, we would love to see a positive review on iTunes. And until next time, remember to act on what you've learned, and you'll be ahead of most of the world. Impact Teams Radio.